at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw, C70 is bat at C70, and I am imagining that you are tired of hearing from me. It's been a week with two bonus shows. I hope you've checked out the Reds and the Cubs show that we've had. Plus, I was over there with Ben on talking about birds this week. So probably should just let my guest take care of things. Obviously, Alan is still out of pocket. We will have a little bit of a conversation with him at the end of the show if you want to stick around. But this week, joining me in our long line of excellent guests is the prognosticator supreme, which I think involves waving hands and instead of casting spells, casting spreadsheets. We're talking with Ben Cerutti from Birds on the Black and at STL Fan BC7 on the Twitters. Ben, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you, Daniel?
I'm doing pretty well, I think, and we will find out because it was a day on Twitter, and we will get to that in a little bit. Well, actually, let's just start with that. Why not? Cardinals announced that they're having a press conference all of a sudden. It's that time of year where extensions happen. I don't know that anybody expected it to be Oli Marmol
No,
getting a 2 year
I
extension.
think people were thinking Paul Goldschmidt, even though they said they wouldn't. People were
Mhm.
thinking, hey, maybe it's Ryan Helsley after the spring he's had and the spring the bullpen's had. But yeah, I didn't expect Marmol.
No, it kind of, and it's really, Katie Wu has that article out that kind of helps explain some of what was going on. But the Cardinals have gone through this whole winter with this. It seems like anytime you've asked like John Mozeliak or anybody like that, it's like we like Oli Marmol. We really like him, but he's going to have to produce this year, right? There was this idea that this year meant something, right? That there was some stakes for him on this year, and I'm not saying that there aren't still, but it seems very strange that they would wait until mid spring to go and make this move. Does it feel weird to you too?
Yeah. I honestly somewhat thought that we'd see it right after the season ended, since he was coming
Mm-hmm.
into the last year. Like, when's the last time that the Cardinals went into the season with a lame duck manager? Was it 2011 when
Probably.
La Russa said he was going to retire at the end of the year?
Yeah, and then that was, I mean, he didn't say that at the time, right? He went to
Oh, that's true.
2011 with that, but it was also one of those things of, okay, well, Tony's here till he wants to be gone. So nobody really
Right.
thought much about it.
He was on the Wainwright and Molina plan.
Right, right. So you'd have to go. I don't know where you go back to. I mean, I don't know manager contracts that well, but I mean, you're probably getting back into. I don't know. You may be getting before Whitey before you've had something like that.
Yeah, Torrey Jorgensen. I don't know, like somebody on a short term, I guess.
Yeah, but
Because
and like
those late '80s, early '90s teams had some two, three, four coach seasons.
true. Um, but you've also, and I think that maybe proves that this extension isn't necessarily everything. Most of those guys got fired with at least a year or so left on their contract too.
It's true.
So, um, I don't know that this means that. I don't think that this means that if the Cardinals won 75 games this year, that Oli Marmol will be back. It just means the Cardinals have a sunk cost, I guess, that they're willing to pay than they've put out there.
I absolutely agree. I had a Royals fan buddy of mine text me a little while ago that just said, I'm shocked the Cardinals gave Marmol a 2-year extension. They had the worst season in my lifetime. And he's a little younger than me. But I just, I responded with Cardinals never let their coach manage as a lame duck. So they'll still do what they need to do if last season happens again next year. Like I see no reason why they wouldn't can him after a 75 win year. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I was trying to look at the optimistic side of things here. So I looked up some things real quick since I'm a
Hmm.
stat guy. Um, Thinking of just some of the best coaches in our lifetime, right? Like Tony La Russa. He had two teams that lost 90 plus games. Bobby
Yeah.
Cox teams lost 90 plus games 3 times, including year one, he lost 93, and year two, he got worse and lost 94.
Hmm.
Terry Francona's teams have lost 90 plus games twice. Joe Torre teams 3 times. Dusty Baker, 2 teams to 90 losses. Bruce Bochy has 5 90 loss seasons. Buddy Bell coached over 1,200 games, and Marmol was 71 and 91 last year. Buddy Bell's teams for his 1,200 plus games averaged 68 wins per 162. So it's not like he doesn't have company for guys that are widely respected.
Absolutely. Some of that is market, right? I mean, you can go 71 and 91 in Kansas City and nobody bats an eye.
Right.
Um, and you do it in St. Louis and everybody, everybody, you better just hope nobody knows your address. I guess is that's the kind of type of thing.
I hope that's not really true.
Yeah, I hope not. But then again, today's day and age, I don't think you rule it out. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that it's very interesting when we talk about Oli Marmol. Everybody talks about last year was terrible, but nobody seems to mention that the year before that, he managed that club to a divisional title while still navigating around Albert Pujols' final year and Yadier Molina's final year and what could have been Adam
And
Wainwright's final
Yachty
year.
not even wanting to be there, it seemed.
Right,
Uh,
right. I mean, he did a lot of things that maybe I don't know that he gets the credit for. So it's like if we're
yeah,
going to, it's almost a little bit surprising that the Cardinals didn't give him an extension after that, right? And then we wouldn't have had to worry about it here.
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, even with last year, Marmol's still over 500.
Hmm.
Like I think a lot of people forget that too. Yeah, he was 71 and 91, but he won 93.
Yeah, yeah,
And it didn't take a 17 game win streak to do it or anything.
yeah. I think that you know I was talking with Ben this week when we were talking a little bit before, obviously before this stuff news came out, but we were talking a little bit about Marmol, and I'm like, Ollie's the kind of guy because he's young, because he seems to be in tune with the analytics. Between a guy that the clubhouse likes. I mean, as far as we can tell, you know, at least a majority of it, right? There's always going to be the one or two players that
Right.
don't like anybody, um, but it feels like that's the kind of guy you want to be able to give a little bit of a leash to and let him be there for 4, 5, 6 years because he really could develop into something. But I don't know if baseball allows it, and I really don't. And I think we've proven the St. Louis market doesn't allow for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. I think he's a guy that could be a good up and comer. But sometimes it takes guys multiple places to do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think about like Andy Reid was a phenomenal being in Kansas City right now. Andy Reid
Right.
was a phenomenal coach in Philly, but I mean he's a guy who got basically told to leave there, but I don't know if they ever officially fired him. He just kind of left for Kansas City when he became a free agent, and he found gold here with Mahomes. But Belichick got fired in Cleveland before going to New England and becoming a superstar there, coach. And I think sometimes it takes change of scenery to become great, like Torrey. But I hopefully that doesn't happen here with him.
Yeah, well, I mean, even tie it closer to home. Tony La Russa spent what the first 4 or 5 years in the White Sox and till he got fired and went to Oakland and became the guy that everybody thought he was, right? Or the guy
Right.
that we remember him to be, I guess.
Exactly.
So, so, so yeah, but it is still, I'm still a little bit surprised that the Cardinals gave him 2 years plus this year, because it is just an extra year of sunk cost if they have to move on after this year.
That's
Um,
true.
I mean, I'm sure 2 years gives him more security. Again, we don't. He's not going to be getting. He's not getting huge money. No manager gets huge money, but definitely not a guy like him. So it's not a huge thing. But the Cardinals are at times a penny pinching organization that don't necessarily want to cut players because they're paying them. It seems a little bit surprising that they went two instead of just one.
Yeah, I don't know. Trying to think of with Schilt and Matheny since LaRussa, I don't know that I've heard of an extension of one season with either of them. I don't
Yeah.
remember though if that's true.
Oh, you're
Uh,
probably right. They
One
tend to
other
do
thing that I
multiples.
feel remiss to not bring up is that being said, with all this we've said about Marmol in a fairly positive light, I do think it's like completely justified for fans to want more, even if they're going to give them a
Hmm.
break on last year.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, you're always going to want, man. I mean, until you win a World Series, and even then, I mean, you
Until you're
probably
competitive in the playoffs, I feel like.
maybe that will go so far so long. But I remember, and you may as well. When Tony Russo game, they went in '96 and everybody was happy, and then they were pretty bad for a couple of years, but they had Mark McGuire. But then 2000 they get in the playoffs. In 2001 they get the playoffs. 2002, but they never get to their series, and they get to the series in '04 and don't win it. And
Yeah,
there was a lot of he's never going to take us all the way. I mean, there were people there were people flying banners at spring training saying fire Tony La Russa. All that, and a lot of that went away after '06. But
right.
even so, I mean, Tony had been a very successful manager here, but he wasn't getting the World Series title. And so eventually that became, what have you done for me lately?
Fair. Yeah.
Hmm. So, but that said, I think if Ollie goes to the playoffs, especially the way things look right now, I mean, if he can go to the playoffs for 2 or 3 years, he buys himself a lot of goodwill. Let's put it that way.
I agree. I mean, I'm trying to think, like under Schilt, I guess they did go 3 years in a row. Technically, that last one was a wild card loss in 2021.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, before that, it was Matheny's first few years that they went, and then it kind of fell off. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it would probably take another 2 years of straight playoffs and maybe even two straight division titles to like get people off his back because
yeah,
we haven't won two straight division titles since Matheny.
yeah. I mean,
14,
that is
15.
true. That is true. Of course, and again, the Schilt era is so broken up because of 2020 and how crazy that year was.
Yeah,
Um, and then of course, then turn around and get fired kind of out of nowhere after that playoff loss.
yeah,
But yeah. I mean, and I don't think the Cardinals want. And it's another reason why I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't go ahead and extend him earlier. I just don't think the Cardinals want that kind of turnover in the manager role if they can help it. I mean, from Tony La Russa, from Whitey Herzog through Tony La Russa was what, 25 years?
yeah.
No, probably 30 years. And
30, almost 30. Yeah,
and you basically had three managers. I mean, you had some interims, but you basically had Whitey, Torrey, and Tony. And now you're going to have, three managers. All of a sudden you're Matheny, and then all of a sudden you turn around and Schilt, and then you're turning around and Marmol. I just don't think they want to do that. Now, that being said, if this year is bad, it's probably going to happen because we're probably going to have a new front office as well, and they're going to want their own person.
yeah, and that's something I want to go back to what you said about why the 2 year extension. I don't
Mhm.
think the 2 year extension matters so much. I think it's Mosaic's contract's up at the end of 2025, correct? And so
Yeah.
they're not going to go into a lame duck year with Marmol in 2026. We already know this just from
Mhm.
organizational experience. And so if Mazilek's gone and Marmol's not up to snuff, I would imagine that Marmol's out the door with him.
Yeah. Yeah, probably so. And I mean, I know I've talked a few times on the show here about how the whole organization seems to be set up for a significant change in the next year or two if they want to be, because
Yes.
of, of all the contracts and stuff that are coming up due. That um, I don't
No,
know.
I nod my head with you, like listening to you say that every time you bring it up.
And now you can nod your head as we go. But
There you go. Now I'll nod my head along with ourselves talking. All
that's
right.
right. But yeah, it's just it's very interesting, and it's very interesting the ramification. What the Cardinals said was, "Hey, look, we know he's only got 1 year. We know that if he gets off to a slow start, everybody's going to be, you know, the buzzards are going to be circling, especially with Yadier Molina supposedly in the organization, although Yadi still hasn't actually shown up yet.
Right.
Um, and we just want to give him that security."
So
I
that's
think
another
that's.
thing. I listened to BK and Ferrario earlier because Kyle was going to be on there about some
Mhm.
prospect stuff, and they were, of course, reacting to the news live. Something that I don't know how to feel on this still. Do you feel like part of them doing this now, instead of going into the season as a lame duck manager, is just to get people off their backs about why isn't it Yachty or why isn't it Albert, since they're both managing elsewhere?
I mean, is that a part of it? Maybe. Um,
They don't want to answer those questions.
but I still think you're going to get that. If you again with this contract, but if they go 5 games under 500 for the first month, you're still going to get some of that anyway. Probably less than you would. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's probably plays a little bit of role into it. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of heard both sides on the radio earlier, and I can't decide which I which I believe more. Um, I don't know. I don't feel like Mozeliak really shies away from hard questions. I think he politicians hard questions, so I don't
Mhm.
know that that part of it really matters to him or not. I'm not sure.
I don't think it was a large part. If it was, I do
Okay.
think it was a fact. I think it probably did boil down to the fact that look, this the beginning of the season's hard, no matter.
Yes.
Going out starting out and the Dodgers and the Padres, coming home. There's a it's a tough first month anyway, and now you're going to do it possibly without Lars Nootbaar, possibly most likely without Tommy Edman. It's still possible that you'll have Sonny Gray miss a start, although that's getting a little bit less
Yeah, I think
likely.
the latest I heard, I thought was maybe him missing opening day, but being the fifth starter to start the year, like, he can be the number one the second time through.
And that's, yeah. Although I guess it depends on when they can put him on the DL and when he could come back. I would expect, and I don't know this at all. I'm just not looking at the stuff. I would expect if they didn't have him ready for opening day, they'd want to just hold him for the home opener, um, just for
Yeah,
the
maybe.
pageantry of stuff instead of. I guess the fifth start would be against that would actually get you against the Padres. So
Right.
and they may. I mean, you never know. I mean, they could just get him out there as soon as they could. But
Yeah, but the home
in
opener
the
is what, game nine, game eight? So I don't know if you
yeah,
want to, that's almost twice through the rotation. I don't know if you want to miss that many to start with.
yeah. Well, like I said, it's just also that sometimes they don't put them on the. I don't know when the injured list opens up.
Yeah.
If you've got to miss 10 days or 8 days or something like that, it may not be that much
Well, and
of
for
a difference.
pitchers, isn't it 15 or
Yeah,
12?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It's 15 for the pitchers. So,
Yeah.
um, unless they can put them on the injured list, the,
Right.
soon, and
Retroactively.
they haven't done it yet. Um, but anyway, I mean that road got a lot harder with the injuries that we've seen this spring.
Yes.
And that's kind of what Katie was saying in her article. And I think that makes some sense that, maybe they would have not necessarily done this if they were going into the season full strength, although it's hard to imagine they wouldn't have done it pretty soon after the season started, even either anyway.
Yep. I think, yeah, probably better to do it now than after a slow start. Like, if the West Coast trip seems to be a problem,
Yeah.
I don't see like I could see if they come home 4-4 and then they wipe the slate with somebody at home, going to like six, even 6-5 would be an incredible start with who we've got
Hmm.
to start the year with. Like, I could see them doing it then mid, but I mean, if they're going to start the year as rough as we think it is, I don't see any reason why they would want to
Well,
do it
except
later than now.
yeah, except for the fact that the Cardinals do seem to get a maybe a cheap thrill out of trolling the fan base at times. So that would be just like them to, him to come back at 2-6 or something, and it's like, oh, we're going to extend Ollie too. Yeah, and then everybody can bring
Announce
their
it
pitch.
opening day
That's right.
during the car rides around the field.
Yep, exactly. And that way, everybody can bring their pitchforks and everything. So,
Oh no,
um,
you announce it while they're riding around in the
yeah,
in the
it's so safer that
convertibles,
way.
and that way they don't have a chance to bring the pitchforks.
Yeah, but nobody comes back for game two. Um, it is interesting. I mean, I don't think that the club is tone deaf or anything like that. I think they know how this is coming across, and I think that's why they've been so open. Like I said with Katie and others, of saying this is why we did this.
Yeah,
Um, I just I think it would have been better to go ahead and just do it sometime in like December. Do it right after you sign all those pitchers and everybody's at least got some feel for it, and then you say, well, we got this. We've given them guys. We want to give them a little security. I think that makes sense. Just going through the winter and saying he's going to have to earn this, and then just giving it to him seems a little bit odd.
yeah, agreed.
Yep. Um, so that's really been the big news of the week for sure. But we did get a little bit more clarification on. We already kind of knew that Tommy Edwin wasn't going to make the opening day roster. Now it's
Yeah,
really
man,
official.
that's ugh. That. Speaking of bungled press conferences, oh,
Yeah. Um, yeah, for this to be a surgery they didn't even remember to talk about at like winter warm up. It has definitely lingered, and I don't know if this is kind of 99 times out of 100 this thing is done, and he's that one rare outlying case, or what. It seems like nobody has a real good idea of what's causing all the inflammation.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I'm
go,
not a doctor.
nor do you play one on TV, huh?
I didn't even sleep at a Holiday Inn last night.
Yeah, I don't either. I have no idea, but it's just those things that we see with the Cardinals, and I'm sure I'm guessing other teams see this too. Don't get me wrong, but we always pay attention to the team we root for. It feels like one of those things where, oh, he's going to be fine. Oh, he's going to be fine, and all of a sudden we turn around and it's the All-Star break, and Tommy Edman still hasn't played a game yet.
Yeah, or he's come back once and hit the IL a second time,
Mm,
or
yeah,
yeah, I can totally see it happening already.
yeah. Which probably didn't necessarily factor into your projections for Tommy
Not
Edman.
as of now, no.
I'm assuming the projections for Tommy Edmond were, based on full playing time. But let's talk a little bit about your system. And I know we've talked about it. You've been on the last 2, 3, 4 years probably talking about the system. But for those that may not know, and I know you've made some changes to it this year, give a little rough overview over kind of how you do this.
All right, so I am not a technological wizard by any means. So I have Google Sheets. It used to be Excel to start all this. I've got kind of a sheet for each player. I look at career averages. I look at individual seasons the last 3 years in the majors and the minors, in foreign leagues, in college, starting this year at least in college. I manually input these because I'm an idiot and don't know how to scrape data. That's why I only do the Cardinals and nobody else. Well, I do some free agents and stuff for people that we're potentially trading for and all that, but I don't do anybody I don't want to do because it takes me forever. Um, I kind of use a special formula to convert each level of the minors and foreign leagues in college to like a major league equivalency for the last 3 years and for their careers. And then I use those outputs to create a projection for the season. What had kind of been eluding me for the last 5 or 10 years, the changes that you alluded to, was I was never able to figure out how to incorporate an age factor,
Hmm.
and I've got at least a way to do that. I don't know if it's the way I will stick with forever and ever, but I've got a way to do that now. I've also kind of changed my formulations for the minor leagues after talking to Kyle Reese and talking to some other prominent prospect people for the Cardinals and MLB in general that I've gotten to know on Twitter and X, whatever it's called now. Um, so I've kind of adjusted those in a more pessimistic way as I added the age curve because the age curve adjusted for level, and so I could see like, oh, it's a lot better that Mason Wynn is killing the ball at AAA than it is if Jose Martinez at 28 was killing the ball at AAA.
Right.
And so I had to somehow, make sure that all of a sudden Wynn isn't projected to be a 920 OPS guy at the major league. So had to adjust that down and figure out, okay, if I'm going to have this, how do I counteract it a little bit? And so I think I've got it in a good place for this year. I'll be looking very much more this year at the last than I have the last few years at my results at the end of the season to see how close I got because I made so many changes.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine that will be something interesting to see and to see if it makes you a little bit closer. I know you put out your post last year, and I'm sure that last year was not the year you want to um, hold up as a test of your prediction system because, I mean, nobody got to hit what they were supposed to do.
Oh no, it was awful. Like I looked at mine. I looked at who did I look at? Who has the baseball prospectus has like the percentile projections on people and
Yeah,
like holy cow, like so many pitchers hit like their 20th and 30th percentiles and 10th percentiles for the Cardinals. It was awful.
yeah. It just again, it's just something you really couldn't predict. I mean,
Right.
um, a lot of people have talked about how you knew going in last year that it was going to be, the pitching was going to be a problem. And we may have known that. We didn't know it was going to be that kind of problem, like record setting type of problems.
Right.
So,
Absolutely not.
so running the numbers this year, and you've got your good, you got your bad, you got your Cerutti, which is kind of your mid range type of pick.
Yeah, what I would consider my 50th percentile is called the Cerutti, yes.
Yeah. Because we got to name stuff after ourselves. That's just what we need to do. I mean,
Well,
if
I
we're
mean,
going to create
if
stuff,
Dan Zimborski named Zips after himself,
yeah.
then I
I
figure
mean,
that the 12 people that look at mine can hear about the Cerutti.
that's right. Um, is there anybody overall that really stood out to you, either because their good was really good, or because maybe even their bad was better than you expected?
So, as far as the goods go, my projections for the good have Ivan Herrera better than Wilson Contreras this year as a
Hmm.
hitter, which kind of shocked me a little bit. Actually, the Cerutti has him better as well, but the bad does not, because Herrera has a much wider variance. That's another thing that I've kind of changed this year is the variance between the good and the bad really depends on age at level and how much time they have at the higher levels as compared to the lower levels, which I thought was really kind of cool the way it worked out. So guys like Wilson Contreras don't have that huge of a variance between their good and the bad, whereas guys like Herrera do. So people that are familiar with the plus statistics in Major League Baseball right now, like OPS plus or WRC plus, where 100 is league average, and each one above or below that is like a percent better than league average or a percent worse than league average. So my Wilson Contreras varies by like 10%, whereas my even Ivan Herrera varies by like 16 to 17%,
Mhm.
as far as the good to the bad projection goes. So that's kind of fun.
And that makes, and you're right, that makes sense because I mean, one, you don't know, we don't have the data on Herrera, right? I mean, he's only had limited time at the major league level, and yes, you can take the minor league level and you can adjust it, but it's still not necessarily the same. So you expect a lot more fluctuations out of, yeah, a guy just coming up or one of those young guys versus a guy that's got a whole lot of data behind him.
Yes, and that's what I wanted that to portray. So
Mhm.
hopefully they do a much better job of portraying that this year. Um, Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, you know, you've also, if I remember right, you just project. You're not projecting playing time, as you said. So, you know, again, it's going to be very interesting to see how they juggle Herrera and Contreras and what that does to their statistical lines as well.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I obviously would think that for my team projection, I do have Contreras as the starter, and then Herrera and Pajes as the other guys. You know, getting less plate appearances. Um, I have them kind of splitting, but I know that's wrong. So I may end up changing that before the year starts, just to, just getting rid of Paje's or changing his to like 100 plate appearances or 50 plate appearances or
Mhm.
something, just for my final projections as far as team win loss rate goes. But yeah, as far as projections for playing time goes, I basically whatever they say is what I put. So like it's got, let's go to the pitching. I've got that up right now. Steven Matz, I've got at 108 innings. Whether I think he's going to give more or less than that, that's what they say. So,
So, if you were to guess, how would you personally come down on Mats? Would you go over or under that 108?
who man, I don't know. I think they're really trying to find an approach that works for him this year.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like they're holding him back. I'd have to say under. I mean, he hasn't hit 108 in his 2 years here. Um, he's been at 48 and 105 the last 2 years, so I don't know that I personally would have him quite that high. But I don't know. Maybe he's finally going to pitch well enough to stay in the rotation or stay healthy or both. But he's done neither 2 years running. So
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I mean, health is always an issue, and you probably will miss some time. I mean, that's just nature of the beast. But I think it will be interesting to see if he can pitch well enough to stay in the rotation.
mhm.
I mean, it probably helps that there's not, it's not a overwhelming rotation, and there's not necessarily just a ton of people knocking the Cardinals have depth, but there's just not necessarily somebody that they have to put in the rotation, so that, you know, that may help. That being said, you know, if Zach Thompson continues to pitch the way he has been last year and really kind of in spring, there's a good chance somebody's going to move out of that rotation. And they just signed Gibson and Lynn. It feels unlikely they're going to move them.
Right. I think Thompson will be the injury guy, though. I
Mm-hmm.
unless Gray, Matz, Michaelis, Gibson, Lynn, unless one of them completely falters. Well, I mean, like Matz did at the beginning of last year, but I don't think he'll be that bad again. That I don't see Thompson stepping in unless it's for the purpose of filling shoes until somebody's back. Now he could knock the socks off the organization and pitch awesome for a month stretch, and then it becomes a question much
Mm-hmm.
more so. But I don't know. Like my projections really do see us getting a lot of starts from these starters and a decent amount of innings at least. Not that they see them as being terribly good
Yeah.
innings, but at least getting innings from the guys. Like they get 851 innings from our starters, which isn't amazing, um, but yeah, they have Matz being the second best starter on the roster in the innings he does pitch. So take that for
Which,
what take that for
yeah,
what's
it's it's not unheard. It's not unbelievable at all. Um, Mainly because the rest of that rotation is again kind of there. There's a bunch of fours and five guys there, and so if Matt's pitches like he did last year, yeah, I think he probably is. Or
to
the
end the
pitched
year.
at the
Yeah,
yeah
to end the year.
yeah the end of the year. So if he pitches like that, he's probably the number two. But I don't know. Like even he said it doesn't really matter to him because once you get to the first, once the season gets going, the rotation gets jumbled up, and
Right.
you're not matching up against people anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And I think there's a good case for that. But um, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. So uh, we've talked. We know Lance Lynn gave up a ton of home runs last year. How did that impact your projection for him? Because I'm sure they didn't project him to give up 44 or whatever he did last year, but it probably made some sort of impact.
Yeah, so they do have him giving up 36 this year,
Mm,
um, both in the Cerutti and the good, but the good has him doing it in 7 more innings, giving up the exact same amount. Um, as far as the bad goes, it actually, you know what? It actually has him giving up less home runs because he's pitching so many less innings.
well, there's that.
But yeah, it does have around 35 homers given up for Lynn this year. Not that, I don't know, Lynn's only given up 20 per 180 for his career, so I could see them being quite high for him. Like I could see it being a lot lower number than that, honestly.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think that since he is so old, since I added age and incorporated age, that it might be that this year is a learning point for my system
mm,
and that it is a little too harsh on this age player. Um, but on the flip side of that, I know that my projection would have been a lot closer on Wainwright last year if I had this.
yeah.
So who knows, man? Who knows?
Well, we will in 162 plus games, I guess. So
Yes.
we'll see
That's the
how.
thing about projections, right? You don't really know until it happens.
Yeah, yep.
Uh,
You don't,
but
and
it's fun to do.
if they're really bad, you just don't mention them, and nobody probably even notices. So
Oh, well, I mention them anyway. I
I
do
know
my
you do.
little postseason roundup.
Yeah, I know. You're just like I would. I would have to do that as well, even if they were terrible. Um,
Well, I
but
did it after last year, so.
yeah, I mean, it's like
Oh.
they're gonna. It's not likely to be worse than that. If it is, you may have to really get into the hood and tinker some. So obviously the buzzy name from this spring is Victor Scott II, and there's a I wouldn't say I don't know. I don't know if it's a raging debate. I feel like I'm on the other on the like the being overwhelmed with everybody else that says he's going to be on the roster. But first of all, what does your projection say about Victor Scott II, assuming he got a full season of playing time?
All right, so Victor Scott II is projected for 567 plate appearances. So he would have a full season basically, if the projections come to be true for him there. I'm trying to find Scott's individual tab, so I don't have to just look at all the different tabs of. There we
Sure.
go. So the Cerutti for him, none of the projections are wonderful for him.
Mm-hmm.
Just such little time and never playing AAA kind of hurts it. Um, but the Cerutti for him does have him at a 225 average with about around a 300 on base and around a 330 slugging. The good for him ups his OBP to 320 and his slugging to like 365. So it'd be a 686 OPS. But the part you're really looking for there is in 567 plate appearances, the Cerutti has him scoring 72 runs and having 67 steals.
Hmm.
which is a dynamic force, right? Like
Right.
those 67 steals don't count towards slugging, but it's an extra 67 bases. It has 11 caught, so it's an extra 56 bases basically. Um, and in 113 hits, that's huge. You know, he has 113 hits, 44 walks, so that's more than one out of every three times on base it has him getting a steal. Um, the good has him at 75 steals and 633 plate appearances, which would be quite incredible. Has him scoring 87 runs this year in a full season of 633 plate appearances. So, I mean, if we're looking, if these are to be believed, 60 to 75 steals in a full season, basically.
Which would be a lot of fun and be a lot pretty incredible. Um, and
Especially
would
with the
get,
defense he's shown this year in the spring,
yeah.
too.
But I'm still not convinced. One, he's completely ready, but two, more importantly, that the club is going to make that move.
Yeah, I'm not so sure they will either. I don't know. The very first post I ever did at Birds on the Black was called the Disjointed Series. And it was a series of posts talking about how at the time I thought the organization was very disjointed in what they were doing. And by that I mean like they weren't building a cohesive team at the major league level. And I think they got away from that again. Their ballpark's pretty big. It plays like a pitcher's park for the most part, which is why they bring in Lance Lynn and figure that 36 homers isn't going to happen.
Right.
And then, you know, last year they say, well, we're going to take our Gold Glove left fielder and make him the center fielder, and then we're going to throw a guy who's played 14 games or whatever it was in outfield and right, and Burleson in left, and we're going to go for all the hitting we can find, but you've got this pitching staff that allows contact, and I feel like they went back to that after the end of the Matheny era, seeing the adjustments that they made for the Schilt era with going heavy on pitching and heavy on defense. And then even the beginning of the Marmol era, I mean, Albert pinch hit and DH, but he didn't really play the field. You know, you still had great fielding. And then while I really liked Jordan Montgomery, the short sightedness I thought of Bader getting sent off for Montgomery, especially when you figure if Bill DeWitt's, you know, so close to Manfred, you know that the rules are changing, and you're going to give up Bader when you know the rules are going to be different next year. I don't know exactly. So I felt like they were getting disjointed again, and I think a move towards Mason Winn at short and a move toward Tommy Edman or Victor Scott in center, as opposed to a Carlson or a Newbar playing center, is moves in the right direction to make this a cohesive, like, building for your ballpark and building for an exciting athletic team that can play behind your defense or behind your pitching to provide that defense, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that there's definitely something to that. And you're right. I think that the club has tended to, ever since Matheny, kind of course correct after every season and kind of go one way and then come back the other way and try to get to figure out what works. Um, but you also got to score runs for this team too. And I do think Mason Wynn's going to have a good season, but early in the season, you don't know what that's going to look like. Um, you know, I think that Dylan Carlson is going to be better, but again, we still don't know what that looks like. And but I still think he's going to be offensively. I mean, maybe not the full package because of the steals and stuff, but offensively may have a better um, early going than Victor Scott. Um,
Well, that, and he's also seen major league pitching for a month,
right,
you know?
right. It
So at the end of last year.
Yeah. And we're getting to the point, and we've talked, lots of people have talked about it, right? We're getting to the point where people are about ready to, it's fish or cut bait with Dylan Carlson, right? Um, you know, comes up in 2020, is third in the rookie of the year race, but again, 2020. And in 21 and 22, he's had some health problems. He's had some abilities, it hasn't necessarily clicked since 2020. And so it's like he needs. I feel like he needs to run. He needs a run of nobody's looking over his shoulder for a month, 2 months, and then if it's not working, then maybe it's time to move on. Maybe it's you figure something else out. But I think this is the chance the Cardinals have to really see what Dylan Carlson can do, and he gets a chance to play every day without having to worry about, you know, 0 for 4 and I might not play the next day.
What are your thoughts on? So obviously, we don't know what the Cardinals are going to do for the opening day roster with Newt and
Mm-hmm.
Edman out. But what are your thoughts on a 4-man outfield? Like I've always thought if you go into a season with an actual plan, and it's not just, hey, Carlson's our fourth outfielder, whatever happens in terms of playing time happens, but really going into it with, I'm going to plan out these first 2 weeks. These are we've got whatever it is, 12 games in 14 days.
Right.
If we have four guys, if we've got Walker, Carlson, Burleson, and Scott that we want to get plate appearances, basically, what about all four guys starting 9 games? And say these are the guys that they're best suited to face. We're facing three lefties. We're going to play Carlson all three of those games or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And really saying, hey, you're going to get 9 chances in these 2 weeks. When you're coming to the ballpark that you're going to get into the game. Is that any different than being in there 12 out of 12 and just saying, hey, let us know when you're too tired to play?
No, I
Because
think that's okay.
because
Go ahead.
then you've got the, hey, I know I'm playing this game if this pitcher's
Mm-hmm.
going, and you've got the plan that players seem to crave.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know that. I don't know. I'm obviously not in the locker room. I'm in Kansas City, and so I don't know if they do that. But as a coach, that's how I'd be. I mean, that's what I did for eighth grade girls basketball. Like that's what I did for my eighth grade football teams that I coached. Like, hey, these are the type of series you're going to be in for. If we're winning and we need a running game, here we go. You're going to be in there. And that's how you prepare players, I think, but maybe not at the major league level. I have no idea.
I think that there's something to that because we have heard. I mean, one, they have sometimes mapped out pitching rotations, but I think they've also mapped out playing time like that because we know that okay, a day where okay, Paul Goldschmidt's going to DH because he's taking the next day off, and I think they worked some of that out. We've heard them talk about that, so I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
Right.
Um, I think that would be reasonable as well. I'm still thinking for me, and I get into logistics of it more than anything. It's like when Victor Scott plays, you want him to be in the major leagues and you want him to play a regular amount of time. Maybe it is that rotation like you're talking about, but still something that approaches regular playing time, right? You don't want him on the bench and
Right.
things of that nature. And I don't know that you really want to send him back to Memphis. I think you'd rather start him in Memphis and move him up. That's just me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's what the Cardinals have typically done. And so I think if you start him in St. Louis and then in 2 weeks, Lars Newbar comes back, okay, well, somebody's got to go down. Maybe you can work around, you know, not sitting him down then. But then when Tommy Edmonds comes back, and if that is in May, I don't know. I think you're right. It could be longer. But, if it is happens to be like he can come back in May, then all of a sudden we're getting tight anyway because you've got Brandon Crawford, and you've got Matt Carpenter who probably aren't going anywhere, right? So your bench is tight. All of a sudden, that 26-man roster, it becomes very difficult for me to see how Victor Scott can stay up, even if he's hitting 300 with steals. I just unless the Cardinals are then going to go ahead and trade Dylan Carlson at some point in time there, or do something that's out of character to make a spot for him. I don't see how that works, and I think the Cardinals are organization that looks down the road and tries not to get caught in those kind of situations. So that's my feeling on why he's going to go to Memphis. That being said, they continue to see a lot of him, and the defense I think is a serious consideration. So, and I said that about Jordan Walker last year, and I was completely wrong. So I feel like, yeah, probably Victor Scott starting, even
Well,
though I don't think he
that
should.
being said, like my projections try to get as close to the mean as possible, and like you've got two catchers who you're looking at probably 400 or 500 plate appearances.
Mm-hmm.
My projections have Donovan for under 450, Gorman for under 500, Newt Bar for under 500, Carlson for under 400, Burleson for under 450. Like we've got a lot of guys that either have sat the bench or have been injury prone or both.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I feel like lately we talk like this, but like I also think the Cardinals have kind of put on the facade of depth is a bad thing. Like
Yeah.
this offseason, like yeah, you traded O'Neill and you traded Palacios and you freed up these room for these starters, and two of them are already hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what else is going to happen with you know Carlson's played. How much has Carlson played the last 2 years? I'm looking at a couple years. I mean, Carlson in the last 3 years has 619 plate appearances, then 448, then 255. And not all of it was because he wasn't playing great. I mean, he had a
Right.
762 OPS in 2022, and he played less than 450 plate appearances.
Yeah, some of it's injury, some of it's usage. Um, I don't know. And again, I think there is a decent argument for the fact that baseball finds a way, right? And
Yep.
if you bring up Victor Scott and he's hitting, somebody else might get hurt, like you're saying, or there's a situation. But then I don't know, because then you also have to factor in Alec Burleson in this situation, even if he's not playing as much in the outfield, although he may get some time out there. If he's DHing, that means somebody else isn't.
Right.
But we've seen him play pretty well this spring, and I, I would hate for them to, have to send him to Memphis because I don't think he's got anything to prove down there.
Yeah, that's true. Like, of course, then you think about who knows who. I mean, like Luke and Baker doesn't either.
Right.
But yeah, as far as Burleson goes, like, yeah, my projections think he's going to be okay, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But they're projecting like kind of league average hitting. Um, I don't think with Burleson's defense he can be afford to be league average.
Mm.
The good has him at like a 106 ish WRC plus OPS plus type player, and I think he's got to be better than that even. So if he can be what he is this spring, obviously, then he's got to be in the lineup. But I don't know. With those numbers, I don't think he does. Maybe he does need to prove himself some more and really work on facing some. I don't even know what it is that plagues him. You'd have to ask Kyle. Like, is it off speed? Is it the? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But figure out a way to get better if hitting is your calling card.
Of course, and then your projections don't get into some of the underlying metrics, right? I mean, it's a little bit more results based. Am I right?
It is. It
Yeah,
is. Um,
because that is one of the things that they've liked about Burleson is some of the underlying numbers that may or may not ever translate.
true. True. Yes, I have not been able to figure out a way to incorporate those the way I would like to. Um, but I mean, they do also factor in his 905 OPS at
Mm-hmm.
Memphis in 2022
Fair.
in 470 plate appearances. So
Yeah.
at the age of 23 years old now. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to project him to do because of what we've seen. It would be difficult to project him to be, more than league average. Doesn't mean he can't be. It's just you're right. It
obviously,
would be difficult to predict it. So I don't know. It is an interesting situation. Obviously, if we don't have these injuries, we're not even having this discussion. And I think the biggest thing really is how long is Tommy Edman out, and we just don't know that. Because if he's out till June or July, then maybe there's a bigger door opening there than it would appear.
yep.
So as we start to wrap down, we've talked about a few players. Is there anybody else you'd like to talk about that's come out of your system?
I would like to say, like, if just as a general kind of overview, um, as far as like best hitters on the team this year, my system thinks that Goldschmidt, Newt Bar, Walker, and then kind of Herrera, Gorman,
Hmm.
Donovan Contreras. What an interesting low one to me was Nolan Arenado. Um, they think he's going to be down under an 800 this year OPS, which he's had 2 of his 3 years here in St. Louis down. That one kind of surprises me. They think it's going to be a second straight year without 100 RBI. Second, or yeah, no, he got to 30 homers last year, didn't he? I don't remember. No, I don't think he
I
did.
don't think so. No, I think he was more
Um,
like in the 25 range.
I'm looking now just to be sure, but yeah, no, he got 26. So it's looking to him to get kind of like last year, basically, maybe slightly better, but not back to the 800 OPS mark. So that one kind of stuck out to me as a surprise. I thought maybe with his past that
Mhm.
they would see more of the past because he's had so long at the major league level, but they don't seem to. Um, Relievers that stick out to me, obviously, it thinks Helsley's going to be the best reliever they have, but it kind of puts Gallegos, Kittredge, and Romero in the same bucket, which surprises me with Romero with how little time he's got. Now, that's the 50th percentile one. Um, the what's even more interesting to me is like kind of the good has Romero is maybe better than Gallegos.
Hmm.
So I'm guessing that has to do a bit with age and with last season because the guy who goes did have his basically his worst year in St. Louis. Um, so that was a little surprising to me. Trying to think of what else surprised me on the pitching side. They really like Andre Palante, but I'm not sure Palante will be in the if he'll be in the 8-man bullpen to start the year or not. Um,
I would kind of guess he was. I mean, I think when I've done my projections, I've put him in there in part because Cardinals have had a real tendency not to send Plante down, right? He played his whole rookie year here. He played almost all of last year up in the major leagues. Just by their usage of him, I feel like he's at least going to get to start the season that way.
yeah, that very well could be. That's true. Just looking at the bullpen now, I'm trying to sort real quick, but it looks like if my projections were to be true, we'd be looking at a Helsley, Gallegos, Kittredge, Romero on the left side, Palante, King on the left side, then Middleton, and then one more out of like Naughton, O'Brien, and Robertson. They kind of have all as the same, basically.
Mhm.
I'd like to see O'Brien out of that group with his strikeout rate, but
Yeah.
maybe that's just me. Maybe Robertson too. Robertson seems to strike out some guys. But I've been really impressed by O'Brien this spring.
And of course, you've got the wrinkle of Fernandez with the Rule 5 that may
Yes.
carry him a little bit more, even if in theory somebody could be better.
Yes. Agreed.
You know. Well, it should be interesting to see. Um,
Was there
and
anybody else on there that you wanted to hear more about that I have not
no, I think
discussed?
well, we didn't really, we kind of touched on Mason Wynn, but I'm always a big fan of Mason's. Um, and we know that he tends to start off slow and then catches up. So it'd be interesting to know if your projection is able to capture that kind of history of his.
So I mean, last year obviously he was quite poor at the major league level. This does have him getting up within striking distance of league average, which if he's a stud defensive shortstop, then him being in the kind of 90. Let's see, I'm trying to see here in the Yeah, basically 90 to 100, meaning 100 being average, like within 10% of league average to average, as an offensive force. Him getting around 25 to 30, 20 to 30 steals, somewhere in there, um, is kind of where they have him with the speed game. What I do like about Win is also, like, you don't think of him as a huge power guy, but the good would have him with like 45 to 50 extra base hits, um, to go along with like 28 steals.
Mhm.
So I think that you could see plenty out of him, in terms of just getting those extra bases somehow with that extra speed he has to kind of prop up his 90 to 100 OPS plus or WRC plus. The league averageness might seem to be a little less average and a little more slightly above average because of that extra speed burst that it gives him.
Yeah, and then you factor in the defense, which of course is not part of your projections, but and then he becomes a pretty valuable part of the team. So
Yes, assuming that he can make the plays that don't require his arm at the
yeah,
level that we'd want.
yeah. Um, it always is good to have that arm though to make up for some problems that might arise. So
Definitely.
uh, all right, well, Ben, I mean, now that you've got your projections out of the way, um, is there anything else in the pipeline, or is this take off for some time and see how they start looking?
Well, it's been a long time since conversations with Cerutti has been going. So, I, I don't know. I'm helping coach my son's baseball team. He's 9U now. So that gets in the way of, the Cardinals fun, but I would love to get back to having some awesome hosts or some awesome guests like yourself and others, but, I'm not going to like promise that anytime soon, I guess.
Well, I guess everybody just needs to subscribe to Conversations with Cerruti wherever you do podcasts, and that way, when Ben drops one, it'll be a nice surprise showing up
There you
whenever that may be. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining me tonight, Ben. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll do it again. If not before, we'll do it next year.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. It's always fun to talk baseball with you, Daniel.
Thank you. Next week we have Richard McGill from the Playing Catch Pod, and maybe I'm not sure if his son Truman's going to join us or not, but we'll be talking about the last week of spring training, pretty much. Well, I guess pretty close to the last full week at least, when Richard joins us next week. But until then, for Ben, I'm Daniel. Good night.
They just won't go away.
All right, we're here with Coach Medlock here talking about the Tulsa Hell Rangers yet again. And Alan, it's second week of the season. What do we know?
Not much more than we did last week. We're still playing the top teams in our district, and we played another historically good one Monday and Tuesday. Played a good early game. We basically, it's one of those situations on a rebuild where it gets frustrating. We had we were one play away from really doing some damage in the first inning, where we could have got out of there, got out of the inning, giving up one run and coming to the bottom half of the first inning, where we had ultimately had the bases loaded. But booted a ball, led to 4 runs, and then in the bottom half of the inning, we had the bases loaded, 1 out, and hit into a double play. Just inexperience at its best. Yesterday, we went to Pryor and played, and they have a long line of they've been really good for a long time, but we couldn't stop the bleeding after a big first inning for them. But we did have a freshman step up and throw 2 scoreless for us, which is big. So we're finding out some things about ourselves, and we have a doubleheader on Friday, which will be good for us, and then go into spring break with a couple of games next week, and we like where we are right now.
Well, good. So what does that put your record at?
Right now we are 2-5.
2-5. Okay.
Yep.
but still plenty of time.
Oh yeah, we got a long,
and
and this will be. We knew coming into this that that we were going to get knocked around in the early going. How they do it is they the basically the bottom three predicted teams, which are we kind of determined just due to a coach's vote. Now I'm in the room and I get to vote for whoever I want to as well. So it's not like it's super one sided, but the 5A districts are extremely good. I mean there's both the top four in each are just teams that will be or shortly or have been in the state tournament recently, one of those situations. So they're going to be really good. Like we opened up with Claremore last week. We have Pryor. We got them out of the way. Then we have again we go to Oklahoma City for a game on Friday, and then we turn around and play two more local teams for spring break. Then we turn around and we play probably the best team in our district for a Monday and Tuesday, and then the schedule really lightens it up. So we expect to be a lot better toward the end of the season, and there's some teams that we just have a hard time competing against. If we don't, our floor is low. If we don't play extremely well against those teams or pitch extremely well against those teams, I mean they get out of hand a little bit early against us.
Yeah. I know in the past, y'all have played at some point in time at the Drillers Park.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are y'all playing on that again this year?
No, we're not going to. We the last couple of years we've played out there, and we played one of our local rivals. But it's there's a lot of moving parts to make that happen, and of course, being a professional stadium and a really nice one downtown. If there's any threat of rain or things like that, it's really tough to move it around. And both years we've had to move it, several times. And as busy as our schedules are, it's really tough if you don't plan ahead. That a little bit of variability in that it's tough. So we decided to take this year off. I think that maybe next year we're going to do it. I know one of the teams that we played early in the season has asked us to play at Oral Roberts next year, and that may be something we're leaning to do. So I don't know, maybe next year, but we could probably be taking 2 years off, and it's one of those. And there's a sizable financial commitment to it as well. That one you're just like 3 years in a row is a little bit tough.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, and for people that were listening last week, if they're keeping track, they may say, "Wait a minute, you only had 2 games." Yeah, it's had some weather issues this weekend.
Yes, yeah, that's Oklahoma for you. I mean, we finished recording last week, and I was thinking, well, if we can get lucky, we could play Friday, and then it kept pushing it back, and we got half an inning in on Friday, and it just started pouring of cold rain. So it was tough. So that's just one of those things you have to deal with here. It rained us out Friday and Saturday, and that's just one of the elements that you have to face.
Yeah, that is a little bit surprising though. We how often that I use you as the weather guide because what's coming to you is coming to us, but we didn't actually get any this weekend. So
it's strange. I mean, it was weird. It was it just came through, and I mean, it was just a drencher Friday afternoon, and it rained south of town where we live. I mean, later in the evening where I thought, well, Saturday may be in doubt because the school we were going to play is not too far from our neighborhood now. And I talked to them in the morning. We tried all that we could, but they just took too much rain. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. I went to do the field there at Hale on Sunday, and we had standing water, so fairly substantially still. I mean, we had to work out basically all up until game time.
Yeah, that does add that extra work, and just again, like we talked about last week, you just got to work around it. So you got only 2 games. You got a player of the week this week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with my freshman, Yandel Jimenez. I'll tell you a little story about Yandel. He, my first year there, I coached his uncle. And where we kind of got off to a rocky start, he's probably one of my favorite players of all time. He was, he really locked in. He had been through a different head coach his previous all 4 years of school. He had a different head coach. And, it was one of those, he's just like, I don't know if I want to go through that again. And he didn't take a hard sell, but I know that he just wasn't as bought in to the program. But, man, he really did. And I started to get along with his family really well. We treated him well for senior night. And his nephew was glad to come and play. And his nephew will really help us. and he pitched extremely well at a big ballpark yesterday. We were really proud of him.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. It's always good when you get a freshman to step up and
Oh yeah,
makes you feel good. So, all right, coming schedule for the next week. You're talking about some games coming up.
yeah. Our Friday game that we had that was rained out. It's a return trip to Oklahoma City this Friday against Capitol Hill High School. We'll play a doubleheader there Friday afternoon. We're out of school Friday, so we're gonna have a 12 o'clock first pitch in front of their crowd. So hopefully we can upset a few of them. And then we go to Pawhuska, which is about an hour north of us, on Monday, and then we host a team about an hour south of us on Tuesday. Okay, Oklahoma, they're coming in, and I know their coach real well. And my assistant runs a barbecue team in his spare time, and he's going to a barbecue for everybody on Tuesday afternoon. So that'll be a send off for spring break. Give the kids off. We'll meet up again on Sunday to do a little workout, do the field, and it'll be right back at it. So yeah, we go. I have no students, but professional day for me tomorrow. We have baseball on Friday with no school obligations, and then we're out all next week. So that's kind of what we have. You get past spring break, you have one more series against a really difficult opponent. Then you follow that into a tournament weekend, and we're getting ready to get locked and loaded. Hopefully the weather holds off, and we'll be going just about every night from here on out.
Hopefully, and it sounds like you're in the Tulsa area on Tuesday. Maybe you need to stop by, probably, and get some of that barbecue.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
All right. Well, Alan, always good to talk to you, and we'll look forward to talking next week and hopefully about some wins out of that.
All right, buddy. I appreciate you.
It's amazing, Jack. This game of baseball, you could not write as he comes back out now and takes his thought. You can't write scripts like we see day in and day out, can you?